All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we've got very good news for what is probably going to be the Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach undercard as Gary Antuanne Russel returns as he is simultaneously being ducked. This is going to be my line. Ducked by all of the so-called big-time players at 140 pounds. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to be in the 140-pound division and the 135-pound division as people are awaiting the fight announcement for Gervonta Davis and Lamont Roach. It is expected to be one of the biggest fights that will take place this year in boxing, if not, well, let's be honest, it's probably going to be the biggest fight that takes place for the remainder of the year, as Gervonta Davis had fought Lamont Roach to a draw. There was, lukewarm interest in the fight opponent, Lamont Roach, for the last fight, but that's going to change significantly in this fight because Lamont Roach performed so well. There has now been a new order by the WBA that will most likely make a fight take place on the undercard of Gervonta and Lamont Roach, and that is Gary Antuanne Russel, who has to fight, who's ordered to fight is mandatory, Andy Hiroka, and at 140 pounds to defend his WBA title. That is an absolutely great fight, in my opinion, because Gary Antuanne Russel, who has been put in, relatively hard throughout his career, he only has one loss, and that's to the WBC champion Alberto Puello in a very, very close fight that some people say they thought Gary Antuanne Russel won. But Gary Antuanne Russel dominated Rayo Valenzuela to win the WBA title in his next fight, but now he's getting hit with this mandatory. And I think that's great because it's keeping him active, and it's an attractive matchup to build Gary Antuanne Russel for the rest of those guys that are at 147 pounds who are going to be, caught between a rock and a hard place. What is the rock and the hard place that I'm talking about? It is, and who's now stuck in it? Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, and Teofimo Lopez, who are all, with the exception maybe of Teofimo Lopez, fighting at a catch weight for the April 2nd card coming up in Times Square, New York, where Ryan Garcia is going to fight Rolly Romero, Devin Haney is going to fight Jose Ramirez, and Teofimo Lopez is going to be fighting Arnold Barboza. Those guys, if they're going to go up to 147 pound, one of the rocks or the hard play, the rock is Jaron Ennis in that weight class. Now, Ryan Garcia is, and the Rolly Romero fight is already going to be made for the 147 pound championship for the WBA world title. The current WBA world title holder was elevated, Jaron Ennis, to the WBA super champion, and he's supposed to be unifying with those two. That was another move that the WBA had made, along with a couple other mandatories. But I do believe that Gary Antuanne Russel, and if he gets past Hiroka, which I do think that he will, he can get, and you have Puello versus Sabril Matias. If this fight goes off, let's say Gervonta fights in July or August, right? Right now, I think it's most likely that he's going to be going back to that he may go back to September. He may. I'm thinking that he may do that. But this fight having been ordered, and you have up until May 21st to come up with an agreement, I think this is probably going to wind up landing right on that undercard, and it should be. another opportunity, maybe in January or February of 2026, to have a unification fight between the winner of Puello and Matias and Gary Antuanne Russell. That is a 2-belt unification fight at 140 pounds that is right there, man. And I think that we're probably going to get that. Now, I don't know whether or not Gary Antuanne Richardson Hitchens, who is the IBF champion, whether or not he would be available, or whether or not he's going to be available to fight Gary Antuanne Russell, or whether or not, he would go the Teofimo Lopez with the WBO route. But whatever that case is, Gary Antuanne Russell is going to be right in that mix. And I would favor Gary Antuanne Russell to beat everybody at 140 pounds. I think the only guy, obviously, that is questionable with him winning, to me, is Alberto Puello. And because Alberto Puello beat Gary Antuanne Russell, I considered Alberto Puello to be the number one 140-pounder, the guy up out of the Dominican Republic. But I do want to put in a note that he's not going to be seeing Devin Haney at 140 pounds, as Devin Haney has already flown the coop. I hope that Gary Antuanne Russell can unify, and then I hope he moves up to 147 pounds and he can get that fight with those guys, as well as the 147-pound champion, the unified champion, Jaron Ennis, who has the IBF and the WBA. And actually, man, that's WBA title that Gary Antuanne Russell has probably puts him in very good position to immediately get a shot at Jaron Ennis. Now, the fight with Jaron Ennis is very interesting because of the fact that Gary Antuanne Russell beat Jaron Ennis multiple times in the amateurs. I think he beat him 3 times in the amateurs. He might have beat him 2 times in the same tournament. I can't remember how that happened, but I know that he wound up beating him 3 times. So that's a fight similar to Keyshawn Davis and Andy Cruz that people want to see, because there's a real element of a rivalry there because of what happened, because of what had happened in the amateurs. Anyway it goes, this 140-pound division is looking really, really stacked. The 147-pound division is looking like it's looking young and rejuvenated. Let me not also forget to remind you that Jin Sasaki has gotten the fight that Jin Sasaki wants against Brian Norman Jr. So those guys are going to be fighting in Japan. I think they said that they're going to be fighting Japan also in July. So just a lot of action going on in that. Weight class, and between 140 and 147 over the next couple years, man, we should have a blast. And Gervonta Davis, I don't think he's going to ever wind up going to 140. There had been talk and speculation that Gervonta Davis might be able to fight someone like Gary Antuanne Russell, but I hope the fight with Lamont Roach ends all that talk, because Gervonta Davis just is not in that weight class. He's not that big. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. Please let me know what you think in the comment section about Gary Antuanne Russell and this fight with Hiroka. Whether you think it's something that is going to, lead to a unification fight, or it's a waste of time. Just give me your thoughts on that. I'd greatly appreciate it. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.